Ryan and Ciaran at the brewery with
Ava.
All right, hello. Welcome to the first episode of our brand new podcast. I am Ciaran. I am a student here at the U of M, grad student in the Social Studies graduate program to get a teaching licensure and a master's degree. Right, we're getting one of those.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, and we're here doing a wonderful little podcast talking about a reading that we did a couple weeks ago about ability and like perceptions of ability. I am here today with my co-host Ryan Seaver, who is also a U of M student. I'm going to let him introduce himself. All right.
What up? I'm Ryan Seaver. I'm a U of M student, as stated. And I guess at the heart of this podcast, we're really trying to do here is discuss our readings in a more informal manner. It's a chance to hang out outside of class and explore new connections to the reading, and also to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Because, podcasts are fun. Ava,
Yeah.
our guest, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ava Krajewski. I am also a U of M grad student in the same master's program, if you can believe it. And I'm just here for a fun time.
Our sponsors for this episode are the Pike Vending Machine, Station 280, the Minnesota State Fair, with the coupon code ABILITY2025.
Yeah, I can start us off by like establishing what we're specifically going to talk about is chapter 6 and 7 of the Deborah Stipek reading that we had to read about 2 weeks ago about ability. And she sort of described ability as two different things. She has two different theories of ability. But she also describes it in its relation with the idea of like achievement. And she sort of said like ability is to someone's capacity as achievement is to someone's performance. So like if you do really well on a test, that's sort of you performing. And it is like analyzing your capacity to actually do this task, right? Whereas ability is like your sort of innate thing that you can do. All right, and then there's two key like concepts or theories that Stipek sort of delves into. The first one is the entity concept of ability, which is like a stable trait, which believes that ability is like a stable trait, where individuals sort of have like a fixed amount of their ability of what they're able to do. And it's not really affected that much by like practice and effort. So you can try really hard at like being, I don't know, what's a skill?
They use the tennis example.
Okay, yeah, the author, she uses like an example of tennis. Like she could like try playing tennis, and she could like never ever do it. And if you have sort of like the entity mindset, I like to use sort of mindset as like that, you never think you're going to actually improve. Where she counters it with this idea of like the instrumental incremental concept of ability, where ability is sort of like an actual skill. It can be increased through like practice and effort. So if you are actually like doing tennis every day and you sort of have this idea of like, oh, I did this a little bit better than I did yesterday, right? If you have sort of that view of ability, then you feel like you will be improving and you'll just have like a better outlook on yourself and what you can do. And then the last sort of thing we want to like delve into and like define before we actually get into this like discussion of Stipek and this chapter is the idea of like impression management, which is like really where this applies in like the classroom environment, where impression management means sort of like you're making statements and you're engaging in a sort of behavior with the explicit goal of like influencing someone else's judgment of yourself. So like when this comes to ability is like you act in a certain way or students act in a certain way that hides either like their lack of ability or their lack of perceived ability at a topic. So they might like not do a question, they might not raise their hand, they might not do certain things, or they might act out in other ways so they can avoid showing what they know, right? And that's really what I think most of the discussion for like the first part of this podcast will be about, is sort of what Stipek talked about relating to that. So I'm gonna hand it off to Ryan and he can sort of go through like our general thoughts and like general things that happened throughout chapter 6, and then we're going to get into some questions for our guest and also just some general talking. Yeah.
All right, so chapter 6, Stipek goes over both definitions of ability, and she kind of talks about how they impact and influence students, which is sort of where the impression management comes in a bit, and kind of like how that manifests in student behavior. I think the three big strategies, because I mean she ties the impression management to avoid perception of failure, because you don't want to be seen as, you know, like not smart or a failure. And honestly, like a lot of this I connected to like the grading structure in schools, because it is like a lot of it is very punitive in nature. And I talked about that in my discussion post a bit, because the day I read this, we were going over the grading policy in Edina schools. But getting back on track, the strategies that Stipek specifically talks about are to minimize participation, false effort, and to just ensure success. Which, like, ensuring success can manifest in like cheating or just doing the bare minimum. False effort is, I kind of thought false effort like tied into like with the bare minimum, because it was like kind of like trying to just fly under the radar a bit. And then minimizing participation, like skipping school, not trying. What I thought was most interesting, that what she talked about in chapter 6, was the section on procrastination. Just because I also procrastinated doing reading, and then I read it, and all like the various different reasons on why like a student would procrastinate. Um, yeah, I don't know. It was kind of meta. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to say on that, our guest?
I also really connected to many of the strategies that she talked about, because I found that, especially with the ensuring success, a lot of it could come from like perfectionist tendencies. They brought up the term overstriver, compared to like overachiever, in the sense of it needs to show up perfect on paper, even if I don't learn anything. And honestly, many of those techniques I used to get by in some of my harder classes, or some of my classes that I couldn't like give my 100% to, for actually like learning. And that shows up like as that procrastination. And I also thought that like the setting unattainable goals, this is kind of going back to another strategy that doesn't fall underneath the overstriver, but setting unattainable goals so that it's like, of course I couldn't achieve that because it was too big of a goal for me. And often, I don't know that I would do this, but sometimes I'll witness like students or my peers, not in this program, but in like my undergrad, saying like, I can't write like a 20-page paper. Like that's, and yeah, that is like a high expectation, but proclaiming something as an unattainable goal so that from the get-go, it's established that they don't need to put effort in. Because if they fail, it's on the fault of the fact that the goal was unattainable. So, and I thought that the test example of like, did you study? And like, if you put effort in, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because yes, and if you do poorly, then it reflects badly, like, oh, you studied, but you still did badly. And then if you didn't, it doesn't, you still did poorly. So I thought that that was really interesting. And the idea of like putting in effort, and the way that you can either feel shame for doing poorly or like begin to disvalue academia.
Yeah, I'll like keep it brief, but like I definitely like echo, and especially like when you brought up like the test and the studying, like moment for me when I was like, oh damn, I did this, was for the ACT of all tests, where like I like signed up to take it through like my school or whatever, and like didn't do any of like the study stuff at all for it, because I was always a student that like never needed to study for a test. I didn't learn how to study until college. I didn't like actually like know how to push myself like that, because a lot of stuff just came easy to me. So then like the ACT comes, and I'm like, oh, I didn't study for any of this. So like I stayed up until like 2 a.m. the night before. And like just like finding like free stuff, and then I was real sleep deprived, and I took it the next day, and I got like a fine score, enough to get me into the U, I guess. So I guess like I that didn't prove her wrong, but like I definitely like if I did get a really bad score, like this would totally be an example of like where I'm like, oh well, I got a bad score not because I'm dumb, but because like I set up these like unattainable expectations for myself of like, oh, I like stayed up really late, I didn't study like any of the things before, that's why I got the bad score, not because I'm bad at this stuff.
That was no, like how you phrase that, especially at the end, I feel like that was the example I resonated most with, and it's also the example like when talking about procrastination that I hear most common from other people. Like, well, if like saving an assignment for like the last minute, like doing it the night before it's due, it's like, oh well, yeah, I got like a C or a B on this because I waited last minute. It's like already I don't know. The article I think used the term like self-handicapping, which I honestly don't know how I feel about the term, but like
It's like the 90s.
yeah, 90s term. It felt a bit outdated, but like I mean in the sense that like you're already kind of like limiting that outcome. I want to say, I don't know.
Yeah, like setting yourself up for failure, I think is like, or let's try to think of like a self-inflicting. Where did you learned helplessness? Yeah, that's what that means. Perfect. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like there was a lot of reading through this where I was like, oh, that's me, that was me, that was me, that was me. So it's not even just like. I think every student goes through this. I think every student feels this way, like no matter where they fall in the classroom. Like if they are like a really high achiever, they still will engage in strategies. I think a lot of it is just like how schooling and education happens in the United States does like feed into sort of creating these like strategies and behaviors.
I would second that because I mean I brought up like the grading structure before. That's like so crucial to this, but I think like behind like the punitive side of it, because so much of, especially in this reading, so much of like ability and effort and outcome are like tied together and they all kind of inform each other. I think not just of like grading or like grading systems, but also like gifted and talented programs that also kind of like reinforce that idea that like, oh well, these kids are naturally smart, they don't need to put in that much effort. And also how much like impression management ties into that too, because like it's like, yeah, I did this and I didn't do any work and I did that. I don't know. That's most of my thoughts on it. TBH. I want to thank our first sponsor in this episode, the vending machine in the basement of Pike. Have you ever had a 3-hour-long class? A class that goes until 7:30 p.m.? If you have, then we're sure that you need something to do during those breaks that are few and far between. And as we are entering the fall and winter, there's no reason to leave Pike Hall and touch grass. So how about you head on down to the basement and visit the 2 vending machines. There is a plethora of delicious snacks and tasty beverages. What are your guys' go-to orders at the vending machine? I'm a Coke Zero guy myself. So what are you waiting for? Head down there and grab some chips or a Monster Energy, the red can. The machines take Apple Pay, cash, credit, or UMN bucks. And it is restocked every once in a while. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
All right. So we sort of said that like Stipek argues that girls feel less competent than boys, and she like cites a lot of different like articles. Like when I read this paragraph, I was like, where is like the non-citations? Because it's like the first sentence, and then like, oh, another thing, and it said like in math and science, and then there was like 80 other articles. And then she sort of like delves into this. She says it has like effects that like it affects when girls grow up and they enter like gender stereotyped fields. Like I would say like engineering or even history is a very like male dominated field, at least at the U. And so like Stipek argues that this comes from like a deeply embedded stereotypes and like parental influence. So we actually came prepared, Ryan and I, and we got a woman as our first guest on this podcast to see if she can shed any light on Stipek's analysis. All right. But no. All right. All right, no, but in all seriousness, what do you like actually think, or what do you think of her point that she makes? And like, do you think it still rings true today in the girl boss world of the 2020s? Because that's what sort of I was thinking when I was reading this, where I was like, this was definitely true in like probably the 90s and the 80s and like when she was coming up, but now I feel like it's not there yet. We're like not there, of course, but we've definitely made gains of like women and girls being represented in like male dominated fields. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective.
I think first of all, the fact that she makes the differentiation between parental influence and societal influence is really interesting to me, because I know in like a student's life, they like the parents in society are a little bit different, but the parents themselves were influenced by society to then influence the students. And so I think that distinction is not necessarily like key, because developmentally it may be like important for the students to differentiate between like what is the parent telling you compared to what is society telling you. But despite what the parents may tell a student, the student still receives like from media or from their friends or from the school like community and culture like a lot of that gendered like aspects surrounding like subjects and like ability and competence. And I mean, my own personal experience, like I did quite well in math and science, especially in middle school, until I very much so like dropped off in high school. Like I did like the AP sciences in high school, but I stopped taking like math classes after a certain point. And I don't know if that was necessarily because of societal influence or just because I wasn't interested in doing math. But going on to college, and I started as a political science major, and I definitely felt some of that from like my classmates and the professors and the way in which discussions were approached. And so I ended up switching to just doing a political science concentration and majoring more so in like history and leadership, which interested me more, but also I felt like my voice was respected more. But I don't know if I can comment on like women in male-dominated fields beyond my own perception, since I'm going into a female-dominated field. I know that it definitely affects pay rate, and I'm mad about that, and I'm mad that we don't talk about that more, especially in our program. Yeah. Because
Troy, get on that.
Yeah, Troy.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Because I know that it's been something that we've talked about, like, after classes and stuff like that. Like, I know Rachel's talked about it and Maddie's talked about it. Overall, like, I think it's mostly due to societal influence. Like, women's intelligence is valued less than men's. And so that will impact the way in which teachers, even subconsciously, go about teaching their students. Unless it's like a very active, like, I'm going to undo something. So.
Yeah, and you brought this up earlier, but I'm curious, like, because you said that like you stopped caring about like math, and do you think it was just like, even though you said you were good at it, but you just think like the societal powers that be, as a way of saying it, or like, again, or just like the general social pressure of like pushing girls away from like STEM style stuff, like made you less interested in it?
I don't know if it was necessarily as like clear as that. As I see this and so I'm not going to do this. Like, I don't think it was a very conscious choice. mostly I didn't really know what I wanted to do at high school when I wanted to grow up. I knew that at the time, I wanted to be a veterinarian because who didn't? And so that's why I was like emphasizing the sciences a lot more. But by the time that I got to like 12th grade and I was like, okay, I'm going to be applying for colleges and stuff like that, I was really interested in writing because I took AP Language and Composition. Yeah, but there was like a lot of like subtle messaging for women, like not to be too braggy about like academics. Like I'm a smart person, but I don't want to like talk about it too much because I don't want to come off as like conceited and shit. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that was a large part of it. And also in like middle school when lots of like the math classes were like the advanced math classes were mostly guys and like a couple of my friends, it wasn't fun. So, yeah, but they were taught by women, so that was nice. Now, I want to thank Station 280 for sponsoring this episode of Ryan and Ciaran in the Brewery. This local haunt has brought countless smiles to graduate students, working class people, and Como hipsters for 15 years. They have daily food specials and 2-for-1 drinks every single day. They also have a happy hour from 3 to 6 p.m. with $1 off 2-for-1 drinks. Station 280 also hosts a variety of games like darts, pool, and pull tabs. Don't gamble. With football season starting up next week, make Station 280 the place to watch new Viking quarterback J.J. McCarthy lead us to probably forgettable season. For more information, visit station280.com and visit Station 280 at 2554 Como Avenue, right off the Como Ave exit on Highway 280. Plenty of parking and fun to be had. Once again, thank you, Station 280, for sponsoring us.
Nice.
Talking about race, Stipek brings up gender and age and how it affects children's views of competency, but does not talk about race or ethnicity. We looked up Stipek a bit today, and they appear to be a cis-presenting white woman. Part of the reason this could not be included in the discussion is just because she doesn't feel positioned to talk about it. But I don't know. I think that obviously race and ethnicity need to be talked about. Like, I look back last week, I had my first week of like the teacher workshop at Edina, and I kid you not, race and ethnicity was the only thing they talked about. They brought in not even a gender difference or anything. It was solely race and ethnicity. They put up like all the student like scores from like MAP tests or MCA tests and had them divided up by the US Census, where I think it's white, 2 or more races, Asian, Black/African American, Hispanic, Latino, or other. And they use these statistics of these goals and outcomes to talk about their goals for the year. And essentially being like where they're going to focus more and stuff like that. But I mean, keep in mind, Edina is a predominantly white school. But I mean, in every single category, white students were doing better, or even like I think one question was the perception of how they're doing, and they felt that they were doing better, versus Black and Latino students were not at that same spot. And I mean, that was from last year, and obviously a lot of things happened last year that could have definitely did impact student participation, engagement, and things like that. But I don't know. So bringing that up and then connecting it with like student perception of ability from a race or ethnic standpoint, I think about Liga's class this summer,
Yes.
where it's like culture in schools, where a lot of this is dictated by teacher vocabulary, teacher behavior, like how they treat students of color versus white students, especially in these like conversations about ability and achievement. Um, yeah, I don't know. Would anyone like to touch on that? I don't want to talk too much.
It's a podcast.
Oh, I forgot that's what we're doing.
Yeah, we're just chatting over here. Yeah, I think that it was, it had to be either a deliberate choice or a naivety in which Stipek didn't bring up race, because she also didn't bring up ability and disability in the
Ooh.
article about ability.
No,
Which I think is crazy, because that was what I thought this article was going to be about. And
The other ability.
it's the other ability, I guess. But both of those things directly tie to like educators' perspectives a lot of the time because of societal oppression and the way in which we think about like our students and what they're able to achieve. And so I think that it would have been important to address. And at first, I thought that there was just like a little snippet about gender, and then it became a bigger discussion. It could have just been she felt she had the experience to be able to talk about it. But still, I think that she did research. She could have talked about it, or at least acknowledged that I'm not going to talk about it in this specific article, but maybe another time, or this is an area that needs to be further explored. Like, I personally, if I wrote it, I would have acknowledged that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple things. I definitely agree with like what all of you said. Like the ability thing and like disability is like a crazy again oversight. It's like, and I wrote in our little notes. I'm like, maybe it's because like it appears in other chapters, because this is like a book. And there's lots of chapters in a book, but like again, I think you would hit on it because she talks about gender in like 2 paragraphs. She talks about age in like 4 or whatever. And I will say, because like I said, I found some stuff about her, not a lot. I found like all of her like university website stuff, and she has a Wikipedia, which is pretty impressive. But like she got her PhD in like the 70s. Like she went to Yale. And she got her PhD in 1977. And it seems like since then, she's just been like in academia. And her focus is on developmental psychology and specifically like early childhood development. And I was looking at like the article she's been doing recently, and a lot of it is focused on like elementary ed and like preschool and like kindergarten and specifically math, like, and like again like the STEM sort of stuff. So like it makes sense why she's bringing all of this up in her writing in this chapter, right? Because that is like her niche and that is her strong suit. But to not see that like acknowledged and it's just like not mentioned at all is like not like frustrating, but like do it. And like again, this is like probably written after, I think this was in the late 90s, so this is after all of like Gloria Ladson Billings stuff. This is after like so much stuff we've actually read where they do the work, you know? So it's like you could have done this. Otherwise, like I liked a lot of the stuff she talks about, and I felt really called out by what she said. But okay, but I think that's anything else. Any on this? One more thing.
One more thing. This is more so for us than necessarily for something that Troy will know. But I was reminded of the video we watched in EPSI of graduating. Is it Tyler or graduated Steven?
Yeah.
Because
Tyler? Yeah. He's probably
yeah.
seen it. Have you seen that?
I mean, have you seen have you seen that video? It's about a student who has a disability that majorly impacts the way in which he interacts in a classroom environment, and it also like the teacher sucked. Like, I mean,
She was really bad. She also had no support.
Absolutely no support for Tyler Steven. I forgot his name. I put Tyler ? In my notes. But and then we see like 10 years, 5 years, I forget how many years later, and it's actually really frustrating the ways in which the school quote unquote supports him when really it's clear that they have like this entity capacity idea of ability for him in the fact that he's not able to achieve this, and so we're just gonna have him sit and stare at a wall or do the laundry for the soccer team, and it's just like really frustrating. And I was reminded of that. So yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to thank our last sponsor for this episode of the podcast, the Minnesota State Fair. All right. As University of Minnesota students and lifelong Minnesotans like the three of us are, all right, the Great Minnesota Get-Together is the place to be at the end of summer. Now, at the time of recording this episode, it will be open for another week until September 1st, Labor Day. All right? It's open from 7 to 11 p.m. every day, or 7 a.m. from 11 p.m. every day. Tickets are $20 for adults and some other amount that is less for every other type of person, like elderly and kids. I think babies are free. And we actually have a referral code for 0% off of your ticket and anything you buy at the fair. All right? Now, if you use the code ABILITY2025, that is ABILITY2025, your $20 ticket will transform into a $19 ticket with a $1 service fee. So, if you walk up to a vendor and you actually say to them ABILITY2025, they will be really confused and they'll charge you full price. All right? Now, I actually went to the fair this year, and I had a great time visiting. All of the things, like the Ag Building, shout out Sea Fans here. All right? I waited 40 minutes for a donut. And I also got to try out some new vendors. If you do end up going, visit the Lumpia City vendor by the sheep and poultry. They have a really good French toast thing. All right. So please go there while there is still time. Try it and make it out to the state fair. Now we're gonna do like our last little like section, kind of. This is what we thought of. I think it'll be kind of fun. Not really fun, but interesting to talk about. Because we're moving on from chapter 6 now to chapter 7, where she outlines some like recommendations on like effective classroom practices. So she's like, okay, I've talked to you for 6 chapters or so about all this theory and like these things that are happening in the classroom and like motivation and how this works and how this affects like their perception of ability and all of this stuff. Now here's some stuff that I've seen and that like I have studies that show work in like not combating that, but like creating an environment, creating a classroom, creating a learning space that will like make it so students don't feel like they have to do these things, that they employ these strategies, right? Okay, so like, yeah, we're gonna go through each of these categories and like sort of give our take on whether like we agree with like sort of her suggestions. So like the first thing she talks about in this chapter are like assignments and tasks. So she like talks about that they should be like clear, the instructor should be honest about like the expectations, and they should be like accessible. And then she also talks about, which I think we all generally agree on, right? I don't think. You disagree? Okay. Talk on it, Miss Graduating Tyler.
No, I'm joking.
Okay. And then, like, we move into, like, this one I was kind of, maybe we could talk about, like, challenging but achievable for all students. So, like, difficulty should vary according to student skill and need, and then it should also challenge highest achievers. So, like, the two things I think that I thought about was, like, if we make it as teachers, as educators, like if we vary every single thing, like difficulty, like I'm wondering how much extra work is that for us, or if it is something like we could do easily and quickly. Like it's definitely a skill we learn, but I'm curious about that. And then the other thing is I definitely agree with like the challenging highest achievers. I think we can all maybe relate. Like there was a lot of times in school where we were just like really bored because we like blew through stuff really quick. Because Ava, you said you were a good student and a smart student, and I was probably a smart student. And Ryan, you were probably.
I was.
Yeah.
I was. Yeah.
So like I definitely like feel that like I wasn't properly engaged enough, and like I wasn't challenged enough. Because I feel like if I was thinking back to my anecdote about like the ACT, like if I was like, oh, I gotta like do this, I would have probably like learned to study earlier than it took college when I actually was challenged. Yeah. But do you guys have anything about this sort of like section?
I mean, I forgot what I was gonna say the second I grabbed it, but I was thinking about the ACT too, because I mean, like, I was in like a lot of like honors, and I had my fair share of AP, and so I did not study for the ACT at all, and like I got an okay score.
Enough to get here.
Enough to get. Well, actually, I didn't submit it because I mean it was a COVID year, so I didn't have to. But
I applied before COVID happened.
see,
like 5 months before.
Yeah, I applied after. I don't know, but what this whole discussion on assignments and tasks and like varying levels of difficulty and also like making sure it's achievable for all students, I think about kind of like UDL, and specific. My brain's going to vocab intervention, because it is like a form of scaffolding, and also specifically because I saw it at Edina recently. I'm connecting everything to Edina.
That's what's like most
Full
apparent in your
circle.
life right now.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, literally.
Personal experience, babe.
That's so true. But like, I don't know. Yeah, I wonder with like what I saw a teacher doing, who was an alumni of this program, Evan Ward, shout out, was he went through the first chapter of his geography textbook, and he picked out tier 2 and tier 3 vocab, that he would teach for that, because that's also like going back to when I talked about the school meeting and the goals. That was kind of what was part of it. Like they were implementing like mandatory like UDL vocab interventions and whatnot, and so I don't know, I think something like that could possibly like align with like there's like tier 3 that challenges highest achievers, like because there were some weird words in that geography chapter. I didn't know them. Like
math,
no, yeah, like map. It was
rocks,
no.
geology.
Yeah, it was challenging though. But I feel like, you know, stuff that is universally kind of like hard falls in there, but I don't know. Do you see where I was trying to go with this before I lost my train of thought?
Kind of.
No.
Absolutely, yeah. So you're saying like like assignments and tasks should be like UDL, which is like universal design for learning, right?
Yeah.
So it should like have like a baseline where like any student can access this, but then there's like little like path. I kind of see it as like pathways, and like you can choose sort of like there's areas that might challenge some students, and it might not challenge other students. Like they might just like walk right past it, or like, and so it's like accommodating for students and having the right like tools in your pocket, right? Like scaffolding tools, like the vocab stuff, where it's like, oh, a student might really need the extra vocab stuff, like the worksheet or whatever you have for like these tier 2, tier 3 vocab words, right? But a student who doesn't need that could just like, oh, ignore this. Like I know it, right?
Yeah. I think like also, you know, like because we want it to be like challenging for like those highest achievers or whatnot. I don't know, not to say like exactly setting the bar there, like at the highest achievers, but I think like with kind of the vocab stuff at least, like doing that like with a tier 3 vocab word. And then, you know, if there are other students who are not getting it, I feel like that's where the individualized like help and like intervention in the classroom occurs.
I also wrote down the word scaffolding. UDL is a really great example of that. I'm gonna need to keep being reminded of these vocab words and these acronyms. Yeah,
MTSS.
I already forgot about that.
Systems of support.
There you go.
I had the multi.
But I think that going in and having that built in is going to be easier than trying to like adjust and make that space. Like after you realize, oh shoot, I don't have like something that will challenge the student, or the student's really struggling. I'm just like aiming down the middle road, when really students are going to be all over the place. Like structuring it in from the get-go. Since when I went to teacher prep week today, the beginning of it, and snaps for me. And I could see like their need to like adjust certain things and the difficulty that some of the teachers had in doing that, and the way in which they like just breezed past certain things that would have been like really helpful, or I would have wanted to spend more time on. But it also does like put a lot more pressure on the teachers. I mean, it is our job, but having more support in that would be fantastic, since we have these other things like we need to be cell phone police, and we need to be able to do this and that and all the other thing, and we need to pay.
Lunchroom for some students.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lunchroom too. Yeah, there's so many different things in which it's just like, it's okay, the teacher can handle it. Like, I heard the phrase today, for teachers, they're great because you put a nickel and you get a quarter back. And it's like,
Oh my God.
isn't that crazy?
Like a 65-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
that's an old person.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
They're right, but it's
I
like
mean,
they've
they
been
are
on-
right,
yeah,
but it is sort of like wow, that's great to hear when I'm going into this profession.
Tell a student teacher.
Yeah, yeah. I was like in this room and I'm like taking notes here. That came from the interim principal of all people.
Oh,
so
nice. Oh, was this before you knew him as the principal?
this is after.
Okay. No, that reminds me of earlier this summer. I had a bunch of family over for like a mini. Was it a family reunion? Oh, my second cousin was graduating college. I think she went to St. No, she went to Carleton. Sorry, so that's beef. But her grandpa, my great uncle, was there, and he was like a principal, or he was a teacher, and then a principal, and then like a superintendent, and he was like, he's also like way retired, like 80s, and he like the stuff he was saying was just like, all this stuff you're gonna learn in grad school, you're not gonna need that. Like, it just comes with like working, and it does. But I'm just like, this is a great thing to hear like right after I did my first week of this grad program, and I'm like really liking it.
Dang.
But it's just, that's how old people are. Moving on to goals. All right, this is the other thing. This is the second thing Stipek brings up in chapter 7 are like classroom goals, student goals, and how that should sort of work in the classroom. You kind of brought it up already, Ryan, when you're talking about like setting the bar high, right? And she sort of specifies that like goals should be like short term. Like you can do long term goals, but those are like hard. And I think short term goals, where it's even like a week or two, right, or even just that day, or even just that hour, like can do a lot, right? And she also says that like goals should be varied among students. She said providing incentives for setting challenging goals, right? So like getting the students to set a goal is already like a task to do. But if you get there, once you do that, right, like encourage them to do it themselves, and to like make it challenging. And so I think that's like I liked this section. I think these are like things that we can do. I always like when I was like a long-term sub and I was making some stuff, I always love like checklists and like having like clear dates, and like if you like scaffold stuff and if you like differentiate and you make it look clear, like students will then be like, oh, I can do this, because it actually isn't that monumental of a task. When you break things down, you're like, just do this, they can do it.
I think about like breaking things down, and I've had this said to me in the past, but my teacher said it today actually. We're breaking things down to the point where it's even like pull out a pencil, like something like obviously you would need a writing utensil for like an assignment, but even like breaking things down and making it things more clear like that can be really helpful for students even when they're like older, i.e. like not 4 or 5, and like, but I don't know, that's what I think of with that. While you were talking, I thought of this is like, it's education related, but also it's from TikTok. Was like called like the Great Lock-in of September to December of 2025, where it's basically people just talking about how they're gonna like set goals for like these 4 months and like lock in. Yeah. Also like people posting videos where it's just like life goals and stuff like, and I mean like, but I mean also like achieving is, we're talking about goals and like how there's like stuff where like, I don't know, like maybe I want to go to the gym 5 days a week. By day 3 or 4, my brain's already telling me, oh, but see, there's this reason why you shouldn't go and stuff like that. I don't know if that's a matter over mind argument.
I think like peer accountability. I don't know if Stipek mentions this in the chapter, but I think peer accountability could go a wrong way. I'm just thinking about your example of like, oh, going to the gym. Like if we had like Luke here, right?
Why are you bringing up his op right now?
Because he goes to the gym.
He invited me once.
Yeah, see?
With Dan. I said no.
But like, okay, let's like yeah, you're like at day 3, but if you had like a gym buddy, then you're letting them down, right? And so then there's like that aspect to it. So I think that could also like translate in the classroom environment.
Well, and also like the example you spoke of with like if you try like these harder questions, like having like the incentives like that. I mean, I'd go to the gym if there was more incentive in it for me. Like,
That's true.
I don't know.
And when I go like this, I have something to say. As a very goal-oriented person, I appreciated this section just in general, but also kind of like tying back to chapter 6, she said that warning students that tasks will be difficult like increases the effort that they do, which I think is important. But also like breaking it down for them can go back to like the clear instructions aspect too. And as someone with ADHD, that also is really important for me. And so I think I agree with a lot of what you guys have been saying of like that accountability aspect, but also like a fair warning when it's going to be difficult and like breaking it down so that it can be like step by step, even if it's as simple as taking out a pen, because sometimes on rough days you need that. So real. Yeah.
Okay, but no, for evaluation, we should provide clear feedback, avoid global comments in that feedback. So just being like, all you did, or just like very like good work, like the general stuff that is kind of canned. I fall into that trap when I got lazy with some grading stuff. But, you know, you get lazy sometimes. Focus on behavior, so like focus on like how they did and how they like worked through the project rather than like the actual like aspect of how right they are, right? Because I mean it's like the progress that they're making. I think about in the EPSI class where it's like if a kid goes from like 10 percentile reading to like 30 percentile, like they're still not at like the 70, but that's still like a 20 percentile. That's crazy, right? It's crazy progress. So like
Gotta look at the growth.
that's what you got to look at. And then provide substantive comments. That's what I'm saying. Like avoid like the global kind of canned stuff. Give people multiple opportunities. I love a retake, but I liked Jalen's like Google form. Like they need to actually like kind of take the initiative themselves. Like allow them so many opportunities and like give them the space and like actually like dedicate time to do it. Because if you just like mention it offhandedly, they're not gonna do it. But like get them to think about it. But then like yeah, have them like take up the initiative to get a better score. And then it says to celebrate everyone, which I like because everyone did something good.
I really like that too. Yeah. That was one thing that I started. I think I put in like parentheses that it was either 0.7 or 0.9 for evaluation that she wrote about. But I really liked the celebrate everyone, and I was reminded of Mr. Underkoffler in art class. Shout out Underkoffler in middle school. And even if like you didn't finish like the art piece, he went around through the hallway and he brought up like one thing that he liked about each art piece, and that like that stuck with me. I mean, he did say that mine was his favorite, so I mean that's part of the reason why it probably stuck with me. But
So like help. This one is really short, and I think it's like generally true. Encourage and model asking for help. Make it safe. Make the environment safe for asking help. Try to give the perfect amount of help. I thought that was like a bit like vague on how she described that. But then also I really liked how like teaching kids how to help each other. I think this is so true because kids don't know how to help each other. They like I think she brings up an example. It's like a second grade situation, but it's like, oh, how do I do this? And then the kid just gives them the answer. Like that's not helping. That's like no one is learning anything there. So like teaching kids actually how to give their peers help and like lead them to the right answer is like the way to go. And I did this as when I was in high school and stuff, and my friends like asked for the answers and stuff. I would like just show them how to do it, and they'd get really mad at me because they're like, "You're not giving me the answer." Yeah. And I'm like, "Well, I want you guys to learn this because then I will have to." Because this was like a selfish thing maybe because I was like, then I don't have to keep helping you, like keep telling you the answer because it was getting annoying because I wanted to get through it.
Well, I mean, I have kids at Breck who, during our homework block, they'll ask for help. And then when it's like stuff like reading a clock. And when I start talking them through it and I'm not actually giving them the answer, they get sassy. They get really, really sassy. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to bring up on this is what I've seen in like a lot of classrooms is like ask 3 and then ask me. Like even just those signs. I honestly thought as a kid it was because teachers didn't want to do their jobs. And no, and I feel like it's like okay, well, if you're gonna ask me a silly question, but there are no silly questions. Like ask your peers first, but also like I don't like especially after like this conversation specifically. I like see more benefit in having that structure where it's not just like, oh well, I don't want to do this work. Yeah. It's like no, like the classroom is like it should be a collaborative space, and you should be able to and encourage like your students to teach each other and learn from each other.
When I was at Emerson Elementary, most of my job was mostly just like helping students with their homework, and it was a lot of the same thing of like if I didn't give them the direct answer right away, but like just egg them on like, okay, step by step, what do you think it is? They would get like really frustrated, but like learning is frustrating. But I think that that's kind of like a difficult part of being a teacher of like you're only one body, you're only one person, and you can only do so much. And so I think that having the kids being able to like model that and like work through that with other students is really important. So
nice. We love help. We love helping people. That's why we're teachers. Hopefully, eventually. Direct statements. I definitely read this, so I'm gonna let Ryan take it away and explain this stuff. All right.
I've been waiting for this one. Okay, this was probably my favorite part of chapter 7 to read, just because it was that deep. And I don't know, I think that so much of like part of student perceptions of themselves come from their interactions with their teachers. I mean, also like reading like Vygotsky and Piaget, like we've talked about like how like at that younger age, like, developmentally, like a lot of those like perceptions and constructions are like off each other as peers, and then later it kind of evolves into more of like that structural system as they like get more into the world where like grades can like influence those beliefs. But I don't know, direct statements with like teachers, like the teacher-student relationship, I think also just has such a huge part in it, and it's not talked about. So I really like that this section did that. And like my notes these are just my notes. I mean, like saying shit like, don't worry, you did your best, isn't sympathetic. It reinforces self-doubt and ability, because it's saying like, oh, I could put in all this effort and I'm still a failure. Womp womp. And like Stipek also like introduces the alternative to just like, oh well, you gave it a good go, like to comment on like the strategy used, and also like if that strategy didn't work, to suggest like alternative pathways to success. And that's also why I really like test corrections and revisions as a system, because they encourage students to talk to the teacher about what went wrong. And it also, like, it recognizes the effort and the work that students are, like, putting in to their school studies. Yeah. And it conveys, like, that constructive and positive solution. It's not just, like, dismissing what happened. It's like, okay, well, let's work towards something better. And then the other thing I liked about this section on direct statements was that it commented on how it helps with efficacy, as it helps students, like, with their perception of control over outcomes, which I think is probably really relevant for Gen Z, just because, there are so many things that saying, like, Gen Z is, like, checked out of, like, politics because they don't feel they have, like, control over stuff. And especially, like, growing up on a global pandemic and stuff, where it's like, oh, well, world shut down, what can you do about it? Nothing. That's also, like, still impacting schools today. Like, the freshmen I was with today, they had that lockdown when they were in 4th grade. And so, like, but that's, like, also, like, right? But, like, that's...
Yeah.
It was a fun time. Like, But that's such like a age, or like things are important developmentally. Like every age till 25 is. But I don't know, where that like belief that like, control is like important. Not even to say that it's an illusion of control, but I don't know. And I started rambling with that. But I also like direct statements because it attributes success to effort and competence. Although there was kind of a double-edged sword talked about that in it. Because sometimes you can work hard and not succeed. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, it does.
I think that ties kind of back into grading a bit too,
Yeah.
of grading based on like student effort, instead of, I don't know, like the practice of like ungrading that I know that Abby practiced this summer, of like how much is the student like challenging themselves and how can I see that and how is that demonstrated based on like the work that they submit or based on like my conversations with them or what I witness of them in class and stuff like that. Of that ties into like, okay, they gave it a really good go, and so I'm going to grade them well for that.
Yeah. But also then like, sorry, I did that for the
Go for it.
like I don't know, like just grading on effort. Then if they're not like, I don't know, hitting the standards or the benchmarks,
Yeah.
I think that's what's important about this section, is that it says like, instead of basic, I think it also like tells you not to like grade on effort, but like, if the outcome wasn't where it was expected, like propose alternate pathways to get there.
Yes.
Don't just like, I don't know, you tried your best, here's a cookie. You know? No, I did. Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Nice. Final thoughts. We already. I don't know. I thought it was like I said. I thought some of it like definitely rang true. I'm curious about like some of the omitted stuff, or just like interested in that kind of aspect of that. And I generally agreed with a lot of like her prescriptions in chapter 7, with some like caveats. But like I've definitely noticed it in like the education environment that I've been in throughout my life.
Overall, I really appreciated engaging with this material. I found that especially chapter 7 could be fun, like practicing in like application, and chapter 6, I think that with like the missing pieces like acknowledged, it would be like fairly solid. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I did these readings, I read chapter 7 and then I read chapter 6. Crazy. Wait. Okay. Love that. But like I thought like, chapter 7 was really informative. Like, it literally just like, some of it you could read like a list. Like, just like, okay, do this, don't do this. And I was like, this is wonderful. And then, chapter 6 had me really like critically reflecting on everything, not just my own experience in schools, but also like, like, just like everything, like as a student, and also like being like a faculty in school. It's like being self-conscious. That's a real thing. And that also, I don't know, that distinction for me was like mind-altering.
No, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Well, not cool, but like.
No, but it was like, I was
Really
like, this is
informative.
helpful to shape how I critically think.
Yeah.
Anywho, shout out our guest, Ava.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun. I really appreciate being on the podcast.
Thank our sponsors again, the Pike Vending Machine, Station 280, and the Great Minnesotan Get Together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have different sponsors next week whenever. Actually, I think the next one's due at like the middle of September or something. So we're gonna have different sponsors because the state fair will be over, and for all we know, the Pike Vending Machine might be out of service. Who knows? All right, we'll leave it up in the air. But our next episode should be with a very special guest for Ryan and I. Ava will be gone. She'll be off doing her own thing, living her best life.
Yeah.
She's got her own podcast to record. Okay. But Ryan and I will be back eventually with probably a very important person to the graduate program. Not kind of still. No, she is.
Yeah.
She's influenced a lot of people. She's is the reason why Ryan and I are sitting here right now.
So true.
Yeah.
Literally.
So
Yeah.
that's all I'll say for there, and that's all I'll say for this episode, I think. All right. Can we say goodbye? All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.